There are certain rules you just don't break. You never leave your own egg behind. It's simple. If you don't take care of what's yours, it could come back to haunt you in ways you can't even imagine. But for Geron, a curious alien, far from her home planet, this lesson wasn't just about survival. It was a matter of learning the hard way about trust, culture, and the unexpected consequences of intergalactic diplomacy. And it all started with something as simple as breakfast. Imagine waking up on a new world, not knowing what the day will bring, but already nervous with excitement. That was Geron's situation. She was far from her home on an alien world, doing her best to understand the strange human customs that surrounded her. The night before, she'd met a charming human, a crimson-haired pilot, with a mischievous glint in his eyes. They'd hit it off instantly. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. There was chemistry, something undeniable, and he suggested something most would consider ordinary, a breakfast at a local IHOP, the Intergalactic House of Pancakes. Geron had never had pancakes before, and she was eager to dive into the experience. But little did she know, breakfast would soon lead her into a mess of confusion, danger, and a lesson she'd never forget. She was still adjusting to the fact that humans, despite all their quirks, had this strange, wonderful way of making everything feel new and exciting. Geron had heard so much about the human obsession with food, but nothing prepared her for the overwhelming flood of unfamiliar smells that greeted her at the restaurant. To Geron, it felt like stepping into an entirely different world. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling butter, warm syrup, and 1,000 other things she couldn't even begin to name, as her human date, still holding her hand across the table, asked if she wanted anything specific. Her mind raced. What could she possibly choose from this strange human menu? She glanced at him, trying to hide the uncertainty on her face, but his smile put her at ease. "You go ahead and pick," she giggled, the excitement bubbling inside her. She was on the edge of something new, and for once, it didn't feel so bad to let someone else take the lead. But as the waitress, a friendly alien herself, approached, Geron could sense something more than just the usual restaurant vibe. The waitress was visibly stressed, and yet, when her gaze landed on Geron's human date, she softened. There was an unmistakable warmth in her eyes. Geron couldn't help but wonder why. And then it happened. Her human companion ordered coffee, explaining it was brewed from roasted beans, a human staple. "It's fairly bitter, but it contains a common human stimulant," he added, sliding the steaming mug toward her. Geron's curiosity got the better of her. The strange liquid smelled like a mixture of earth spices, and she hesitated for only a moment before taking a sip. It was unlike anything she had ever tasted. Rich, spicy, and almost like pepper, with a hint of something else. For a brief moment, she forgot about her worries, the anxiety about being so far from home, and the strange nagging thought that something was off. Her mind drifted back to her egg, the one she had left behind back at her dwelling. Geron wasn't just an explorer. She was also a mother, soon to be, in a species where the preservation of eggs was sacred. But this moment, the coffee, the food, the conversation with this human who seemed so confident in his world, was almost too inviting to resist. Could she truly afford to be distracted? Shouldn't she be back, watching over her egg, ensuring everything was as it should be? She shook the thought away. It was too early to worry. As she continued sipping the coffee, listening to her date talk about his daring adventures as a pilot, and yes, even as a smuggler, her mind raced. The thrill of hearing about his escapades, the narrow escapes from authorities, and the dangerous cargo he'd transported through nebulas. and warped space made her feel alive. She couldn't help but laugh at his animated gestures. The way he described each near-death experience, with a sparkle in his eye, it was intoxicating, more thrilling than anything she had ever experienced back home. Yet in the back of her mind, a seed of doubt began to grow. She should be focused, right? She should be back in her own world, keeping her eggs safe. And that's when the real trouble began. The waitress, having taken their order, was back at the table before they knew it. Her return marked by a strange tension in the air. Jaren felt it. Something was off. But before she could process what was happening, the human smiled again and looked at her with that same confident gleam in his eyes. Jaren was still lost in the excitement of her new surroundings. And yet, there was a nagging thought she couldn't quite shake. What was it about this human that made her feel so distracted? So at ease in the most unexpected of ways. She couldn't pinpoint it, but one thing was for sure. Humans were full of surprises. But what would she do when the unexpected turned into a real problem? Would it be the pancakes that threw everything off track? Or was it something deeper, more sinister, lurking behind that innocent smile? As Jaren stared at her coffee cup, her mind finally returned to the egg she had left behind in her apartment, now growing cold and distant in her thoughts. The egg that would need her. The egg that would face danger if she wasn't there to protect it. But there was something more, something her human companion hadn't yet revealed. The question was, how would Jaron react when the truth finally came to light? Would she have the strength to protect what was hers? Or would she risk it all for something or someone she barely knew? Stay tuned for the next part, where Jaren must decide whether her place is back with her egg or by the side of a human who's slowly cracking more than just pancakes. The coffee cup sat empty in Jaren's hands, the warm remnants of its bitter taste still lingering on her tongue. But as the minutes passed, her initial excitement began to fade into something more unsettling. Her mind drifted back to the egg she had left behind in her apartment, growing colder with each passing second. The egg, precious and vulnerable, was her future, the future of her species. And while she sat here, enjoying a strange new world with her charming human companion, the fragile life she carried was alone, waiting. Jaren's heart tightened as the thought gnawed at her. The human, still talking animatedly about his smuggling escapades and his dangerous piloting missions, didn't seem to notice the change in her demeanor. Or maybe he did, but he said nothing. His stories were a blur, a mix of risky jumps through nebulas, outrunning space authorities, and transporting illegal goods across borders. She found herself fascinated by the life he led, a life full of risk and adventure, so different from her own. But the longer she listened, the more her thoughts wandered, trying to reconcile this intoxicating new world with the one she was supposed to protect. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized there was something off about her date. His stories, though thrilling, seemed to gloss over details, as if he was hiding something. The smuggling, the near misses with the authorities. There was something more there, something dangerous, that he wasn't sharing. And Jaron, ever perceptive, couldn't ignore the subtle inconsistencies in his words. The way he casually mentioned transporting items that were unapproved, or the times he spoke of escaping from official channels just a bit too easily. It was almost as if he was trying to impress her, to make her see him as a kind of daring hero. And that's when the other realization hit her. He wasn't just a pilot. He wasn't just a smuggler. He was playing with fire, and Jaren could feel it. Her instincts, honed over years of survival in a galaxy filled with uncertainties, told her something was coming, something big. She tried to push the thoughts aside, to immerse herself in the moment, but it wasn't easy. The weight of her responsibilities, the looming presence of her egg, kept pulling her back. The deeper she delved into this strange new life, the further she drifted from the one she was meant to protect. Her thoughts were interrupted as the waitress returned, placing their food on the table. Pancakes. A towering stack of them, drenched in syrup and dotted with fresh fruit. Geron had never seen anything like it. It looked almost too perfect, too human in its simplicity. But the moment she glanced at it, something else caught her eye. A small package, tucked under the pancakes, wrapped tightly, as if it was something important. Her human companion didn't seem to notice. He was already digging into his own pancakes, clearly delighted, but Geron's gaze lingered on the mysterious package. There was something about it, something that didn't sit right. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the soft fabric of the package. She could feel her heartbeat quicken, her nerves sparking into action. Is something wrong? The human. Noticing her hesitation, she looked up at him, trying to keep her expression neutral, but the unease in her chest was growing. No, just curious. With a slight frown, she unwrapped the package. Inside was a small metallic object, something she had seen before, something that didn't belong in a restaurant, certainly not one designed for a peaceful breakfast. Her pulse spiked as the realization hit her. It was a detonator, a remote, trigger device, one that could activate a bomb or some other form of destruction. She froze, staring at the device in her hand, a wave of panic rushing through her. Her human date was still eating, oblivious to the danger now in her hands. The waitress was already walking away, her back turned to them. Geron's mind raced, trying to piece together what she had just discovered. Why would her date have a bomb detonator under his pancakes? Was it a part of the smuggler's goods he was transporting? Was she unknowingly sitting across from a criminal mastermind? Or was this just another layer of the dangerous game he was playing? Is everything all right? The human's voice broke through her thoughts, and she realized he was watching her now, his gaze sharp, searching. His smile, once so comforting, now felt like a mask hiding something far darker. For a moment, Geron didn't know what to say. How could she explain the fear rising inside her? The sense that everything she had trusted in this human was crumbling. She had thought he was charming, exciting, maybe even someone she could enjoy this new world with. But now, she wasn't so sure. No, everything's not all right, she said, her voice steady but trembling on the inside. What is this? The human's eyes flickered, just for a second, before his smile returned, wider, more calculated. He leaned back in his seat, as if this was nothing more than a casual conversation. Oh, that? Just a little something I picked up. Nothing you need to worry about. Nothing she needed to worry about. Geron's mind reeled. She could feel the weight of the object in her hand, its cold metallic surface, almost burning her skin. She wanted to throw it away, to escape, but there was something else she couldn't ignore, something about the way he was looking at her, as if waiting for her to make a decision. It was all too perfect, too rehearsed. He had known she would find it eventually, knew she would ask about it. Why would you bring this here? She whispered, her voice shaking now with a mix of fear and anger. The human smiled again, but this time it was different, cold, detached. Because you're the one who has to choose now, Geron, he said softly. You're the one who decides if you'll stay with me or if you'll leave. With nothing but your precious egg. The words hung in the air like a trap closing around her. She glanced at the door, her mind already calculating the quickest escape route. But the tension in the room was palpable now. Her thoughts swirled with fear, confusion, and a gnawing sense that she had made a terrible mistake. This wasn't just a breakfast. This wasn't just about pancakes or coffee. This was about survival, and the choices she would make now could either protect everything she held dear or destroy it. Jaren's fingers tightened around the detonator. The weight of her decision pressed down on her, and as her human companion's eyes bore into hers, she knew there was no turning back. The game had changed, and now she had to choose whether to stay or escape. Before the bomb went off, Jaren's heart hammered in her chest as she held the detonator, the weight of her decision settling like a stone in her stomach. She had to act fast. The seconds were slipping away, and every part of her screamed to run, to leave the restaurant, to escape whatever trap she had unknowingly walked into. Her egg, her future. They were both at risk now. The terrifying truth was that the charming human sitting across from her was no simple smuggler. He was a player in something much larger, more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. She glanced around quickly. The waitress, now far from their table, had no idea what was unfolding. The other patrons were too absorbed in their meals, oblivious to the tense moment. Jaren's mind raced. She needed answers. She needed to understand what was really going on. "You don't have to do this," Jaren said, her voice steady, despite the rising panic. She wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. "What are you really after? Why bring me into this?" The human's eyes flashed with something darker than before, and for a moment, Jaren thought he might reach across the table, snatch the detonator from her hands. But instead, he just leaned back, his casual demeanor returning, like this was all just part of a game he had mastered. "You're smart," he said softly. "I knew you'd catch on eventually." Jaren didn't flinch. She kept her grip firm on the device, but her mind was working quickly, piecing together the story. Smuggling was just a cover. The bomb wasn't meant for her. It wasn't meant for anyone here. It was meant for something bigger, something further down the line. This was a test, and Jaren was the key to passing it. "You've been watching me," she said, more to herself than to him. "You knew I'd find out. You knew I'd care about the egg." His smile was chilling, but it was the truth. "Exactly. I knew you'd care more about your egg than you cared about me. And that's what makes you special, Jaron. Your instincts, your drive, your ability to choose. You'll make the right choice. I'm just here to guide you." The pieces started to fall into place. He hadn't been trying to deceive her for some petty profit or personal gain. He was a part of something far bigger, a covert mission that could reshape the future. And Jaren had unknowingly become a part of it. The egg was not just hers. It represented something monumental, something that, if left unchecked, could change the balance of power in ways she couldn't imagine. Before she could say another word, the door to the IHOP burst open, and a group of armed figures, humans and aliens alike, stormed in. Jaren's pulse spiked again, but this time, it wasn't fear, it was survival. They were here to take her, to take the egg. It was happening faster than she had imagined. She needed to make her move. Without a second thought, Jaren slid out of her seat, the detonator still clutched in her hand. The human, still calm, didn't stop her. He had expected this. She had one chance to escape, one chance to protect her egg, and to survive whatever storm was coming for them. But then, something unexpected happened. The leader of the group, an imposing alien with an intricate battlesuit, paused as they locked eyes. Jaron's breath caught in her throat. The alien didn't look like an enemy. In fact, it seemed almost relieved to see her. "Jaron," the alien said, voice low but calm. "We've been looking for you." Jaron froze, her thoughts spinning. Looking for her? She had never seen this alien before, but the look in their eyes made something inside her stir. It wasn't a threat, it was something else. A connection, a sense of familiarity she couldn't place. And then, the realization hit her like a sudden wave. "They know me," she whispered. The human smiled, his expression turning more serious, now less playful. "I thought you'd figure it out." The leader of the group nodded. "We've been tracking you, Jaren. You're not just a mother to that egg. You're the key to a much larger plan. And we need you now, before it's too late." Jaren felt the weight of the words settle over her, heavier than any responsibility she had ever known. She had thought she was just protecting an egg, just living a simple life. But this was no simple life. This was the future of an entire galaxy. A future she held in her hands. Her heart raced as she glanced from the human, who had now become a stranger in her eyes, to the alien group standing in front of her. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just a passenger in this story. She was the hero, the pivot on which everything would turn. But before she could respond, a sudden explosion shook the building. The walls trembled, and the ground beneath them cracked. Chaos erupted as the structure began to collapse. Jaren barely had time to think as she darted for the exit, her instincts screaming at her to move, to get to safety. She didn't look back. The human smile, the alien leader's calm demeanor. It all felt like a distant memory now. She had one mission: protect the egg, protect her future. She knew there would be more battles ahead, more choices that would test her. But for now, the first step was clear. As Jaren dashed into the unknown, the sounds of destruction and chaos behind her, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. She was no longer lost. She knew her path, and no matter what came next, she would face it head on. The world around her was changing, and so was she. The egg was no longer just a part of her future. It was the future, and Jaren would fight for it, no matter what. In the distance, the war for control over the galaxy had just begun. And Jaren, she was ready.